All right, welcome to Halitics. I'm Hal Ginsberg. So glad to talk to you this Monday. Hope you had a great weekend, and I think we got some decent topics to talk about. If you don't call in, that's fine. I do want you to call. I love to talk to you. That's the whole point, really, of the show. The reason I do it this way is to dialogue with you, have a conversation. I was watching earlier this morning the Revolutionary Black Network. Those guys do a good job. I like it, but their conversation is among themselves. It's kind of an echo chamber, not completely, and they bring in new folks, and I certainly agree with 95% of what they say. No one's ever going to agree 100% with each other. I mean, that's part of where we are, but they do a good show, and it's voices you don't normally hear. So I do recommend Revolutionary Black Network, but what they don't do is what I do, which is talk to you, talk and dialogue with you, not just talk directly to you, but listen to you, have a conversation, have a back and forth. That's exactly what we did Friday with John. I thought it was a really great chat, and I really appreciate John for many reasons. One of them is that he helped me with my new system. I hadn't gotten calls from you on my new phone with my new number, 242-5646. At least I hadn't yet, and I really wanted to make sure it was working, and lo and behold, it was. So John, thanks for helping me out with that. Look like you may see a little bit of a different look to my studio. It's pretty marginal, but I moved my pictures around, wanted to eliminate any glare you might have observed from the jigsaw puzzle framed above me. The top one, there's two actually, and there was some glare, so I moved it down a little bit. I may arrange them, but this is all designed to step up my game. Who's my best viewer, best listener? I think, Jeff, really, you probably have logged more minutes watching Halitics, and previous to that, the Hal Ginsberg or the morning show with Hal Ginsberg in Monterey. So I greatly appreciate all of that loyalty. And so I'm going to try to, well, I won't feature your comment today, but I may refer to it. So thanks, Jeff, for all of that attention that you're giving the program. And he asked me, he said, why do you think you've got so few subscribers? And I'm like, yeah, 170 is not that good, right? I mean, it's better than it was. But I really wanted 1,000. I thought that was doable 6 months ago, maybe 3 months ago. I was talking about 1,000, and we're not obviously close. But you know, this can all change overnight. We can go viral. Somebody says, "Oh, that's awesome," and they have a lot of subscribers, or they have a lot of Facebook followers, and they post it, and they tell two friends, and so on and so on. So definitely, this could blow up at any point. But I was thinking a lot about that question, and one of the issues that came to mind, of course, Jeff, very helpful, giving me some suggestions. Do you think it's your presentation or it's your content? And I'm like, yes, it is. That's what it is. So trying to present just a little bit better, a little more interesting, have everything behind me framed and relatively equally, balanced behind me, and not, hanging askew, although there's a little bit of askew back there. So I'll have to work on that. Anyway, that's just part of what I'm trying to do here, is give you a nice presentation, but most important is having that conversation, that dialogue with you. So help me out. Keep that conversation going between us with a call. 240-242-5646. You can see the new number there, and that is via my my Google number, right? I have two Google numbers, and Google does what it does, and what it does generally is pretty good. Before I get into today's topics, and they're not going to be that much different, I hope I put some new spins on it than I have in the past, but I want to just promote tomorrow's live stream. And the reason I'm doing that now is because I can't be sure you're going to be sticking with me all the way to the very end of the program, right? So if you don't, then, I want you to know now. And we had, by the way, when I have guests, I always feel like, the guests should increase the viewership, and sometimes they do. And the numbers have been decent. I think they should be better. I thought that Juan Dominguez was great. I want you to support Juan Dominguez. I hope that you'll vote for him. If you live in Maryland, you got it. I think we have a moral imperative to support alternatives to the duopoly. And yes, Juan is running as a Democrat, but clearly he's a different kind of Democrat. He's not part of the establishment, and he is challenging them at every turn. So I like having guests like Juan on. I feel like that's breaking news. I'm bringing you something totally that you can't see here or find anywhere else. When I play clips, they're generally clips I've taken from other YouTube videos or from other news sources. So you can get them there. You get my take. It's different. Tomorrow, we're going to have another brand new program with all new material. I'm super psyched to talk to Kelly Zemnikas. And I do want to, of course, give a quick shout out to great friend of the program, friend personally as well, Liz Croydon, the comedian whose program I, of course, got a great opportunity to see when I was up in New York with my good friend Rick. So we loved that act that she puts together. She also connected me with Kelly Zemnikas, and I love how she put my face. Well, that's an old mug. I don't know who did that. You see that mug? That was pretty cool, photoshopping with my face on that mug many years ago. I don't know who did that, but that's still beyond my limited skills with graphic design, which is especially unimpressive on my behalf, given that there have been great strides made in the past 9 years since I went off the radio air in the field of graphic design. It's much easier to do now than it ever was before. All right, so we'll have Kelly tomorrow at noon, and she's going to talk about her program, No Responders Left Behind, on Cinemax, I believe. You're not going to want to miss that. That is about the first responders who were at Ground Zero on September 11th, 9/11. And so we'll talk to Kelly about that and about how we as a society, as a nation, betrayed many of those heroes. Whatever you think about what happened on that date, we lost many thousands of people, of Americans, and the heroes were those who went in to try to save them. All right, 240-242-5646. Don't forget tomorrow with Kelly Zemnikas, also known as Kaz. So we'll talk to Kaz tomorrow. I'm super psyched about that. My question for you, I try to ask questions. I try to make every program about a question. Can we answer that? Maybe we can answer was, and I don't have you've seen the promo, presumably. Could we be better, or can we be better? And then that's crossed out. How could we be worse? And I think a big reason that we're as bad as we are is because of our failure to see beyond whatever tribe we put ourselves in. I've talked about this over and over, that innate tribalism, it's certainly writ so large in the Bible. And right now we're seeing tribalism rearing its genocidal head in the Middle East, in the, what do they call it? What is it? It's sort of the Holy Land, right? The Holy Land, whatever term you want to use for Israel, for Palestine, for that region, at the direct eastern end of the Mediterranean, we're seeing the most ugly aspects of tribalism writ large. And it is indeed biblical in terms of what it brings to mind. So no question about it. And, I asked, could we be any worse? And I think we can't really be much worse, right? Because we're pushing our planet very close, right? Probably over the edge at this point towards an even worse, right? I mean, we're in the sixth great mass extinction caused by humans. This is the first one caused by humans, the sixth overall. And I don't, it's pretty hard to say anything could be worse than that. But we could still hopefully save many species that are otherwise likely to be extinguished. I fear we won't. So yeah, how could we be better if we didn't, we addressed forcibly what we're doing. We stopped killing each other. We stopped the genocides, the endless wars. How do we do that? I think we have to put aside that tribalism, that sense that our group is the victim. I mean, I think this is what so many of us perceive. We just can't get beyond it, is that whatever group we're a member of, we're the victim. And not only are we the victim, but we're never the victimizer. And that's got to change. We've got to stop that. We've got to stop being so quick to see ourselves as the injured party and everyone else not only as the victimizers, the one causing us pain, but as people who have no pain of their own, nothing of their own to complain about, to whine about, to beef about. Until we do that, no, I don't think we could be any worse. So this brings it to mind. And by the way, this is also an answer to Jeff's question, which was, well, why do you think you have so few subscribers, Hal? Which he certainly made. You know, I think it was a good faith question, or was it a troll question? I try to give people the benefit of the doubt as much as possible. And I kind of think it was not just a troll question. I know Jeff disagrees with my conclusions invariably. He disagrees with because I think Jeff disagrees with me most is my assumptions about what a great society is, which is that everyone has enough, no one has too much, and that we have a duty to use government, representative government, as the tool to get us to that better place. And he just 100% disagrees. He doesn't see it that way at all. He thinks that we don't have an obligation to help, in general, our fellow man or woman. And to the extent we do, it's never collective. It's never as a society. It's each individual's. Well, it takes all kinds. But I do hope that Jeff, and I believe Jeff, gets something out of this program that he finds of value to him. And that's why he is actually asking, although perhaps in a somewhat snarky way, well, why do you think you don't have more subscribers? So my answer is because I'm real challenging. I bring, to my viewers, I don't view it, the world as us, my viewers, against everyone else. I view the world as it's like the Leviathan. It's all against all. So I always go to my group first, which is also my personality. Maybe not the best aspect. We've got to be better, folks. I'm Jewish. We Jews have to be better. This is just not right. Beating Susan Sarandon over the head, somebody who has demonstrated time after time her commitment to economic and social justice, somebody who has fought for Bernie, who, by the way, happens to be Jewish, right? I mean, Susan Sarandon was one of the first Hollywood stars to go out there and campaign for Bernie, and she's been outspoken. And she's definitely, look, I don't know how many roles there would have otherwise been available for her, because Hollywood doesn't generally provide a lot of work for, actresses in their 50s, 60s, 70s. And she's, I believe, in her early 70s now, started supporting Bernie in her 60s. By then, maybe the parts that were available to her were either not ones she wanted necessarily, or there weren't even any. But that said, to the extent she could have gotten parts, and I think she could. I mean, she's a huge name, right? Oscar winner, very, very talented actor, right at the top, I think, in terms of skill, technique, still beautiful. She should be getting roles. And to the extent she's out there campaigning for Bernie and going on CNN and CBS and ABC and all, and really taking it to the Democratic establishment, I don't think that helped her. I don't think that would have helped. I mean, think of the billionaires in Hollywood who like to think of themselves as liberal, but the last thing they want is someone like Bernie telling them that they have to pay more taxes. Not that you got to pay your fair share. You're paying more whether you like it or not. Suck it. That's not something they want to hear. And they don't want their actors, whom they get to decide whether to employ or not, pushing a redistributionist, a tax hiker on them. They don't want that. So Susan Sarandon has fought the good fight, and she's sacrificed. She's been a patriot. She sacrificed for her country. She sacrificed her own privileges to a degree. I mean, she's not. I don't think she's hungry, right? But I mean, still, she had the ability. She had the privilege to take on establishment elites, and she did it. And so many have failed to do that. So many have failed to do that. So I give her a lot of credit. I was talking about college football with my son the other day, and we're talking about Nick Saban. He's like, Saban's a good guy, and there's no issues with this program as far as we know. There isn't the corruption. There isn't covering up. Now, there may be. I mean, we don't know, because it may all be covered up, but we're not aware, of all the sexual assaults, the rapes that have occurred on other college, at college football parties and the like, and have been completely covered up. The sexual assault, the coaches who have molested either players or other people on campus. We've seen that over and over, and it's been covered up. And as far as we know, Nick Saban at Alabama has run a pretty clean program. So my son said, why would you go after him? And I said, well, he could do a lot more. He's the most popular man in Alabama by far. Don't you think he could get elected governor? And my son said, in a heartbeat. So I said, well, then why doesn't he run for governor and then take over the state and do everything possible to redistribute wealth away from the rich and powerful and make it an economically much more just state? And also a less racist state, redistribute wealth and power more equitably. Why doesn't he do that? He said, well, he doesn't want to do it. He wants to be a football coach, and maybe he doesn't believe in all that. I'm like, that's fine. He can do whatever the heck he wants in the end, but that would be the morally just thing for him to do. And there is a moral imperative. We don't really have the luxury of indulging our own self and our own wishes and our own desires in this moment. It's too fraught. It's too dangerous. There's too much injustice. There's too much death. So Susan Sarandon, and the reason this is relevant, Susan Sarandon has gone out there time after time, unlike Nick Saban, and she's put her own career at risk, or basically I think she's ended it in terms of being a Hollywood actor, a star. And that's something, obviously, Nick Saban, who is, props to the Alabama Crimson Tide. And by the way, for those who are aware of all sorts of violations by the Alabama Crimson Tide football program, I accept that too. I'm just not aware of them. I'm willing to believe that Saban's a little bit better than most of the coaches out there. A little less sleazy, a little less willing to compromise every single moral principle in order to win a football game. Maybe I'm wrong about that. But I'm just making the point that even if that's all true, given his incredible stature in the state of Alabama, the power that he wields, the way he single-handedly could turn that back-assward state in some ways. Now, I don't want to be too negative towards Alabama. I bet you the wealth inequality there is a lot less than it is in California. I'll bet the homeless rate in Alabama is probably a lot less than California and New York State. So I don't want to sit here and be poor-mouthing and attacking Alabama. But the fact is that Nick Saban, unlike just about all of us, really could make things a heck of a lot better for millions of people in his state. And he's not doing it. And I think that's unfortunate. I wish he would. But it's his life. I guess he gets to do whatever he wants. I mean, I don't guess he does. Susan Sarandon is trying. She doesn't quite have the clout that Nick Saban does. Certainly not the concentrated clout that the by far the most popular man in Alabama has in that one state. So, but she's doing the best she can. And she's getting beaten about the head and ears because she made a remark, which I will say was arguably not well phrased. Now, she was, you could say, well, it's obvious how could you say arguably ill-phrased when she is having to apologize for it? Obviously, it was somehow ill-phrased. And I would respond by saying, well, she shouldn't have to apologize for it. And then you might say, well, then it still had to be ill-phrased. Because even if she shouldn't have had to apologize for it, the fact that she does have to apologize for it shows that she offended people, and it detracts or distracts from her main message, which is to stop the killing in Gaza. Right? That's what she wants. She wants to stop, which is resumed, of course, after the ceasefire ended last week. So she's trying to stop the killing. And now she has to apologize for it because she made a remark about anti-Semitism that some Jewish people, and I think many people, a lot of people took issue with, whether Jewish or not. And so you would say, well, because so many people took issue with it, it must have been ill-phrased. And she has to apologize, so it must have been ill-phrased. And I'm going to say, some people get to be victims, and they're professional victims, and they jump up and down and scream bloody murder when someone says something, when they feel like they've been microaggressed. And that doesn't mean it's true. It doesn't mean that what was in the person's heart or even what they objectively said was wrong. I think you can make a case that what Sarandon said was objectively wrong. I do. I think that's fair. But I think, again, we're living in a time when whatever Susan Sarandon said, whatever phrasing she may have employed that offended some people, pales in comparison to what we're seeing in Gaza in terms of the deliberate targeting. If you don't want the word genocide out there, then the ethnic cleansing, the mass murder of civilians by Israel. That's the evil we need to focus on, not whether Susan Sarandon's phrasing was arguably mistaken, was poor, was offensive, was legitimate. I mean, people get offended all the time. Was what was said really objectively offensive? And then we get into this, well, does it really matter whether it was objective? If somebody's hurt, they're hurt. Yeah, it matters. Sometimes you say you don't get offended. You choose not to be outraged. You say, okay, there's more important things that matter. What was underlying the statement was made in good faith with the goal of making life better. So I'm not going to go out there and attack them and call them an anti-Semite and say they're a terrible person for saying this. All right, let's get to here. Here's the story. This is WION. So I looked that up. That's it's Indian, right? It's an Indian TV network, and more and more I find myself having to go to news from either alternative sources or other countries, and not just like the usual suspects like The Guardian, whatever, the BBC, but to France, where I think 24 does a good job, Channel 24, of covering the wars. They're doing a better job by far with Ukraine and covering Ukraine, and I think we're getting pretty good. If you sift through it, I think you can find pretty good information about Israel Gaza in American media, which is surprising, but it's true. I mean, there's a lot of spin, and they definitely are biased, but you can find it out there. I think 24 does a really good job with Ukraine, where it's very hard to find non-pro endless war media in this country. And here we go to India for this story, which I think they do a nice job with ION. So let me play this for you. Hopefully it'll work. Always I'm running into issues. That's the other way. Jeff says, well, is it the tech problems or breathing, or is it your content? So yes, those are all the reasons I don't have more subscribers. By the way, on that note, click like, click subscribe, bottom right, blue and white square, subscribe.
And Hollywood actor Susan Sarandon has now issued an apology for her controversial comments that she made at a pro-Palestine rally in New York last month. At the November 17th rally, the actor said, and I'm quoting here, There are a lot of people that are afraid of being Jewish at this time and are getting a taste of what it feels like to be a Muslim in the country. So often.
All right, let me stop it there. She had a bit of an accent. I hope it was loud enough as well. Well, I mean, she's Indian, so she speaks with an Indian English, right? Speaking, because I think English is the second language in India. So her accent is Indian English since it's an English broadcast. So what Susan said was Sarandon said, I shouldn't call her Susan. I don't know her personally. Let me get that up on screen for you real quick. What she's apologizing for is saying that people afraid of being Jewish right now are getting a taste of what it feels like to be a Muslim in the United States, so often subjected to violence. Now, the reason I think that is poor phrasing, it is poor phrasing, is because Jews are subject to a lot of anti-Semitism here and around the world. I personally have experienced, I don't feel like I've ever experienced anti-Semitism, true anti-Semitism. I mean, I think that people have made remarks. I've been with people I think have stereotyped views of Jews. I've been with people who probably reflexively would say they don't, if they were forced, I don't like Jews. I get that. But I don't think I've personally ever been held back in any way for being Jewish. So my life is good. I mean, I'm privileged. So I don't personally feel like I've ever experienced it. But there is clearly anti-Semitism, right? I mean, I've read about it. Swastikas painted on synagogues. It happens in this country, in America, on signs in schools. So yeah, there's definitely anti-Semitism. So for Sarandon to say that right now Jews are finally getting a taste of what it likes to be a Muslim, no, that's not fair. It's not like it's the Muslims who have always been persecuted and subject to violence, which they are. And we should not, right? There were 3 murdered in Vermont, which is always thought of as a peaceful state. What was it, 2 weeks ago, week and a half ago, something like that? So I don't know who's subject. I saw Islamophobia. I've seen that, where I saw these kind of punks or thugs going after a Sikh who was clearly not Muslim and calling him Muhammad because they were ignorant and they really didn't know what even that, if the turban is not a Muslim headdress, but was a Sikh headdress, but they were just, thugs. And this was at night and I was in a parking lot area, and I'll be honest, I did not intervene. I did observe, and the Sikh was in a safe place. So I can't, I did what I could to make sure that they were safe. But which wasn't much because there was nothing. And I think if I had tried to say something, I would have been targeted, and I didn't want that. But the person was okay, or I would have gone to the police. That's what I would have done to provide safety. By the way, I've got John on the line. John, I'll get to you in just a moment. Thanks for calling. So the point is, though, is that Sarandon said something that arguably, yes, it was poor phrasing. She shouldn't have said it the way she did. I wish she hadn't said it the way she did, but she did. So there it is. I don't think you worry about that, right? I mean, I don't think that's where the real issue is. That Susan Sarandon said something that, arguably was poorly phrased. The answer is we've got to stop the violence, period, against Muslims, both in this country and militarily. All right, let me see if I can get John there. I don't know if you heard that. Yeah, I hope that, you heard that ring? I do apologize. I've got you, John, I'll get to you in just a moment. Just hold tight, please. So there you go. Sarandon beaten about the head and neck because she said that Jews are finally getting a taste of what it's like to be Muslim, when Jews themselves have faced plenty of anti-Semitism. So she was wrong to say it, but the issue we should be discussing right now, what is so much more important, and what, by the way, is leading to much of the anti-Semitism or the anti-Semitic action in this country, it's indeed what Israel is doing. Now, I don't think Jews should be blamed for what Israel's doing. I don't believe in collective guilt. But since so many Jews equate any criticism of Israel with anti-Semitism, it's understandable that people who are anti-Semitic would say, well, hey, Israel's doing bad things. Or even if they weren't necessarily anti-Semitic, people say Israel's doing really bad things, so Jews are bad for doing them. All right, let's get to John. John, good day. How are you today? And thanks for calling in.
Good morning. I'm okay. I'm calling from San Jose. I had to come up here for the day to get my...
Wait, say it again. Where are you now? You're not back in Carmel Valley, are you?
No, San Jose. I got good reception today.
Excellent.
So anyway, I read yesterday, I think, that there were a bunch of Doctors Without Borders workers in Palestine that were a few of them were killed by
that's exactly right.
Defense forces, and they were in clearly marked cars that had their company, their affiliation on it.
Yes, MSF, they MSF. John, let me just jump in real quick. MSF, absolutely, that's important. So I was thinking about talking about it. I just got off on this rant about Saran, but you're right. So it's MSF, Médecins Sans Frontières, Doctors, Médecins Sans Without Borders. The trucks have these huge, you can't miss them. The bombers that swoop low across Gaza, dropping their payloads, can't miss it. And they killed the two people. I think one was the wife of a doctor, or both were wives or spouses, I should say, of doctors. And one was also a volunteer worker, and they were just killed. Yeah, horrible.
Yeah, and the problem, and another issue was a mistake like this shouldn't be made, being that everybody knew they were at that checkpoint. They were told by their boss in Jerusalem that they had gotten the okay to go. And so they loaded up and they made it to the checkpoint, and the Israeli Defense Forces wouldn't let them through. And so they waited there for hours. And then I believe they were instructed to turn back and just go back to where they came from. And when they did, when they were on their way back, they were, the Israeli Defense Forces opened fire on them. And I think, it's kind of infuriating, but at the same time, you gotta see, this is where, and I hate to pick and, open up an old wound, but I feel like Americans are a little bit hypocritical to be lecturing Israel about this after what we did to Iraq. But because I didn't support that war even then, I feel, at liberty to say these things. But it really, I think this is grounds for Joe Biden to just say, hey, as if things weren't already just horrible. This is the one last lifeline these people had, and you went after it. And I think that he should just cut them off. I think at this point, we should just cut them off and let them fend for themselves. It just, I don't really like the fact that my country is helping to support this. And I mean, I don't know what else to say about that.
Yeah, I don't know what else there is, except you're absolutely right, 100%, John, and I'm sort of messing up. This is what was the question was, don't you have more subscribers? Is it the presentation of the content? Yes. I had a image up there from Al Jazeera which pointing out that Israel is targeting ambulances. And I wanted to get the specific. Okay, so here it is. Let me get this image up at least. Although unfortunately, I don't know if I have the truck itself. But yes, Médecins Sans Frontières. Pardon my French. Ho ho ho! Pardon my French, there, John. Doctors Without Borders, who are indisputably a humanitarian group, just like the Red Cross or the Red Crescent, and they are I don't know what do we do. I'm with you 100%. We should be out of there. I was going to ask you what your solution is, and you gave it, so that's it. Let's stop funding these people.
Yeah, I think just stop altogether, and then if they can find it, find a good way to make peace with these people. Stop developing on their land, or stop. What little land they have left, they keep going in there and just taking it. They find creative ways to take it, like telling them, oh, in the West Bank, you're on a historical land. We have to move you, and they just take it. And it's all got to stop, because there's no end in sight to this. I mean, they keep doing things that are just going to perpetuate this kind of thing, and we're like stuck with the tab of that. And I just feel like they're recklessly spending our money on war production, and
well, John, this is why this is where this points to the area where you and I have such profound disagreement. To me, this is a perfect example of the fascism that is in our country and for which both parties are responsible. We're absolutely on the wrong side in this conflict. We're supporting the killers. We're supporting the inhumane bully, and bully isn't strong enough of a word. I mean, what word can you come up with? The persecutor, the oppressor, the victimizer. And the entire Congress couldn't even bestir itself to oppose a resolution condemning anti-Semitism and ignoring Islamophobia. So that's where I am in terms of I can't keep supporting the Democrats because they're no better on this critically important issue.
Yeah, but because they are better on some issues, there are a few of us out there that cannot afford not to support them. I think
I was thinking about your call. I'm going to interrupt you again. I was thinking about your call, John, on Friday. Yeah, I was about the call from Friday, yesterday. And I was thinking, I have a lot of I think it's terrible that fortunately you're okay, but there are people who are situated similarly to you who can't find work, who have to face a diminished quality of a life. And you're saying you can't afford, but that diminished quality of life is just as much the fault of the Democratic Party and Democratic policies as it is Republican. So I don't know how people can be expected to afford to keep voting for the offshorers in the Democratic Party as well.
I think the reason is they see Republicans as a faster way to crash to the bottom.
No, but you see my point. The Democrats are also responsible for the situation that you rightly decry.
Well, I know, but what I just said, you've got to listen to the words I said. The Republicans are the faster way to get to rock bottom, to crash. It's the Democrats. Okay, so basically the way I see it is Democrats and Republicans all want a lot of peasants to do the work. But the Democrats are willing to extend some protections, but only to peasants, not to people climbing the ladder. They want you to fall off the ladder before they're willing to protect you. And I've got to go. But one thing, can I say one thing?
Yeah, go ahead, John. Go ahead, and I'll let you go. Go ahead.
Your content. you follow pretty much what the media cycle, what dominates the media cycle. And what you should probably do is get a few newsletters like from Wendell Potter and Scientific American, and just touch on other topics, that are, that kind of.
That's a really good point. I appreciate that. I'll respond to that. I'm going to let you go, but I'll respond off air exactly how I feel about that. So I do have other guests on, right? Like we had Juan last week. We're going to have Juan Dominguez. I want to be clear about that. We'll have Kaz tomorrow. I don't know. Would Wendell Potter be outside? Wendell Potter's a big Medicare for All guy. And I've talked to him before. I don't know if he'd be outside the cycle. I like Wendell Potter. Maybe more guests would be a good idea. I try to focus on the stories really that are most important to me. And right now, Gaza's just dominates for me. It just dominates. So, and it goes to that whole issue I was talking about, which is trying to be better or at least not worse. And we seem incapable of that. And I think it's because of that tribalism I talked about, our inability ultimately to look at our tribe, however we see it, right? Because, everyone has different tribes. So I think we see it, it's impossible for us to look at our whatever tribe we perceive ourselves in as anything but a victim, never a victimizer, never even morally fraught, morally compromised. And I see so many examples of this. I usually try to focus on those who are members of tribes that are doing harm, that have power and are abusing it, misusing it. So it's so upsetting. And my tribe is Jewish. So as Jews, one of them, I guess, I don't know. I don't really view them as my tribe, but I am Jewish. So I want my people, my chosen people, to be better. And I will call them out. But that's rare. Most people won't. But maybe that's because I don't really view them as my tribe, right? But over and over, I see this problem. So I was on Facebook the other day, and this Facebook friend who's African American was lamenting that they don't have no longer have a black supervisor. They have a white supervisor, and how hard it is. And I was like, you're pointing, it's like the white people's fault. Now, I'm not saying that there aren't problems, but I think if we're going to make things better, we have to look at the universal interests where we can come together. And I get it. I'm sure, I've had black and white supervisors, and I can't complain. I'm not going to say, the black supervisor treated me differently or worse than the white ones. I had good supervisors and bad supervisors who were white, good supervisors and bad supervisors who were black. I had really good supervisors who were women, and I had some bad women supervisors, and the converse is also true. So I don't, for me, that's kind of it's not really been my experience. So I'll just say it that way. But the fact is that I shouldn't say the fact. My strong suspicion is that in general, there is an innate bias among supervisors towards people who look more like them and who have not just look, but maybe are from the same tribe. Now, the same tribe might be they're both black. They might be the same color. It might be they're from the same city, right? Or they went to the same university. Or they have the same accent. There's a million different ways we can see ourselves as in a tribe. But whichever one we happen to perceive ourselves in, it's very, very difficult to view that tribe as being morally compromised, as having, and also you pay a big risk, right? If you're in a tribe and you're accepted in that group and you start pointing fingers at the leader, at the chief, or at everyone, saying, no, we probably shouldn't have crossed that river and killed everybody on the other side and taken their land. Maybe that wasn't a good idea. You just start doing that, you're going to be out in the desert. You're going to be out in, pounding sand. So you pay face a very significant risk when you challenge your own tribe, whatever it might be. And that is a big reason we don't do it. But that's why we are where we are, because people aren't calling out Israel. And Israel, ironically, the fact that Susan Sarandon has to apologize, she has to genuflect to the idea, the received wisdom, the accepted view that among all the victims, Jews are the first victim of all, right? We went through the Holocaust. That's the greatest evil the world has ever known. So Jews, whatever we do to other people, we're the victims. And we're never going to let anyone forget it. Never again. And because of that attitude, we refuse to entertain criticism of our co-religionists. We refuse to entertain criticism of the Jewish state, and we call such criticism Jew hatred. But what the great irony is that someone of the stature of Susan Sarandon, a Academy Award winner, right? Somebody who's incredibly famous. I mean, she's not the most famous person in the world, but I mean, I would venture that there are many hundreds of millions of people know who Susan Sarandon is. That's extraordinarily famous. Is she Taylor Swift famous? No, probably not. But there aren't a lot of people who are more famous than she is. And yet she felt she had to apologize. It was brought to bear upon her. Maybe she felt, I give Susan Sarandon the benefit of the doubt. Maybe she really believed, she does believe she was wrong. And yes, I do think the phrasing was a bit of a mistake, as I said before. But the great irony is that the backlash against her, the effective backlash against her for suggesting that Jews weren't victims, proves more than ever, more than anything could possibly prove, how powerful Jews are, how influential Jewish people are, how much sway we Jews have. So what an irony. She has to apologize for saying Jews aren't victims, right? Because she said they weren't. She said, oh, it's now they finally get what it's like to be Muslim. She has to apologize for claiming that Jews weren't victims or not like Muslims because Jews are so powerful, because we're the opposite of victims in so many cases. What an irony. And so I say to my Jewish brothers and sisters, you want things to get better? You don't want to be a victim? Then you damn well better start fighting for everyone but Jews. And you better start fighting especially for the victims of Jewish people. All right. I was glad John called. Took up a little time there that I may or may not. Well, let's get to this. So I told you this is going to be, we're going to try to get some other views in. So from Shade, who also, I talked to John. John's like, well, you have to vote for the Democrat because they're better on some issues. And I don't think we fully were able to explore that with him, which I'm disappointed. But Shade responds directly to my points as well. So he writes, your idolism resonates passionately within you, akin to fervent religious belief. And that idolism he's referring to is my view that the Democratic Party is a major part of the problem, that if we continue to vote for Democrats, then we are making the situation worsen. We're continuing to worsen it. But fortunately, says Shade, few are embracing arrest. That is true. They are very few and far between. Your repeated claims that electing a Dem is equivalent to Trump's re-election deeply concerns me. And I get that is a fair statement. I don't want to, I don't think it's completely accurate in this. I don't think I've repeatedly claimed that electing a Democrat is equivalent to Trump, re-electing Trump. I don't think it's quite the same. I don't think I've said it's the same. What I've said is I think both are, we cannot afford either outcome. That in the end, electing a Democrat will lead us, and very quickly, to the exact same place that electing Trump would. And in some areas, electing Trump might be less destructive. I don't think that's equivalent, but if you want to say there's some sort, I'm calling that a moral equivalency, yes, I think that's fair. The U.S. teetered closer to insurrection than many realize. Okay, we did. Yes, we did. And the reason we teetered close to insurrection is because both parties have betrayed the working class. Both parties have embraced a corporate soullessness that is destroying lives, as we heard John describe very eloquently on Friday. Beyond the Trump factor, my trust in the Republican Party has eroded. I have no trust in the Republican Party, with most Republican politicians seemingly prioritizing fulfilling donor ob and winning elections over safeguarding our democracy. All right, that's all fair. But the problem is with that is it ignores the fact that Democrats are doing the exact same thing. Israel is murdering civilians. They blew up a Médecins Sans Frontières, Doctors Without Borders truck, and killed two humanitarians. They completely violated the Geneva Conventions in doing so. And Democrats can't say boo. The only Democrats say is, well, you can't be anti-Semitic. We got to vote. We got to condemn anti-Semitism. So, again, there's ultimately both parties are leading us to a burning, directly to where we already are, burning planet, consumed with war and destroyed environment. So we got to go in a different direction. It's not okay to say, well, the Democrats are going to inch us to Armageddon as opposed to the Republicans fast tracking us there. They're both taking us to the same place, and both very quickly. That's the answer, and that's my view. And I don't think it's arguable. I don't think it's gainsayable. Barack Obama bragged about making us the number one producer of oil. So how is that in any way better? How is that less awful than what Republicans have done? All right. We're just about done. It's been almost an hour. I just, let me get this up too, because this was interesting from Shade also. So just going on, and because I think I really have to do him as much justice as I can, which I often, it's very bright, writes extremely well, makes his case extremely persuasively. He makes what I believe is ultimately a weak case about as well as anyone can. So, and since he doesn't call, we have to go with his written words. So in defense of voting for Democrats, and not only in defense, in calling for calling voting for Democrats a moral imperative, Shade continues. It is also crucial to note that we cannot rely on the Supreme Court for an additional layer of protection. That is true. Despite their imperfections, Democrats exhibit more promise in preserving our democracy. No. I'm not their Shade. I'm sorry to tell you. Where is that? What is that based on? There's no specifics I give. Maybe you talk about Voting Rights Act legislation. I don't see where the democracy preservation is in jamming the Mountain Valley Pipeline and the Willow Creek project through, which, are the fast tracking us to Armageddon. as the new Holocaust gets ever hotter. I don't see how that helps, how that's preserving anything. And he continues, right, their stated goals, Democratic stated goals, yeah, they do tend to align favorably. I agree, they do say the right thing, but is it okay to, are you morally superior if you say that you want something and then you act in a way that completely belies that goal? Like you say you want everyone to have health care, but then you do everything possible to prevent Medicare for all from passing? Is that somehow better than just saying we support for-profit health care? I don't see that. If anything, what the Democrats do is almost worse, because it provides people with a sort of a false hope or a false narrative. If only we had more Democrats elected, if only we could stop those Republicans, everything would be okay. And that just so clearly isn't the case. Barack Obama did have he had a veto-proof Democratic majority for a brief period of time. There wasn't even a public option passed. He did get us out of Iraq and embroiled us even more deeply in Afghanistan. So, where is this not statement of goals that align favorably, but actual actions that lead us to those better goals? Again, that's why I think, Shade, you and I disagree. Maybe you're seeing something that I'm not. Obviously, I think you are. Finally, I won't show the clip, but yeah, his comments about the Middle East are also interesting. He supports the two-state solution, which again, I don't think is feasible. And he points out that the threat of a one-state solution is being used by hardliners to avoid a lasting peace. And I think that is absolutely true. I made that point on Friday. I said, look at what Stevens is saying in the New York Times, Brett Stevens. He's saying that basically you can't criticize. He's saying those who say, well, you can criticize Israel and not be an anti-Zionist. What was he? I guess he's saying you can't be for Palestine and for Israel, is what he was saying. You have to be for one or the other. You can't be for both. And I think that's exactly right. Because if you believe in the idea of Israel as a Jewish state, then you're working directly against the interests of the Palestinian people. Their actual interests, their just interests, to have some kind of self-determination, to have real self-determination and real economic security. The Palestinian people can't have that if there's a Jewish state. You only have true justice if you're a full and equal member of a country in which you live. And that can't happen in a Jewish state. Palestinians can't be full and equal members. So hardliners are saying, hey, how could we possibly ever have a one-state solution? If we did that, we'd have to see Palestinians as full and equal members of our society. We can't have that. So that's exactly right. And I guess Hamas, hardliner on the other side, is saying, well, we want one state, which I know many have said means a state that is no Jews. I don't think that's true. I reject that. I don't think that's what Hamas is saying, but I understand that's the argument that some people are making against Hamas. So yeah, hardliners are using one state to avoid peace. But the problem is a two-state solution won't lead to peace. It'll only lead to ongoing war between those two states. I mean, to an extent, we have a two-state solution now. Gaza and the West Bank are supposed to be quasi-independent entities. And yet Israel can, perpetually is impinging on whatever sovereignty they have. So the two-state solution that we have now clearly hasn't worked. All right, that's going to do it for today. Thanks, John, for calling. I'll be back tomorrow with Kaz. We'll talk about first responders. Please comment. Let me know what you think of today's program if you got a chance. And please, again, click subscribe. I want to get those numbers up. Maybe we don't get to 1,000. Maybe we get to 200 by the end of the year.